You were just saying that perhaps not talking about it, but just quietly and inside, people had some bitter feelings. Oh, what were your thoughts about the U.S. government at this point?
I didn't blame solely on the government of the situation, even to this day. And I do feel bitter about General DeWitt. He was the commanding general of the Fourth Army. And I saw in the paper when he passed away that he was not even on the first page, not even on the second page, or the third page of the newspaper. It was way in the back. And it was an uneventful, eventful situation that he demanded that all Japs are no good Japs, that they should be eliminated. Excluded, not eliminated, but excluded. And he was very anti-Japanese. And there were many of the, even the Chamber of Commerce, they wanted to take away all the wealth of the Japanese that are in business. And I think you probably have read different stories about successful farmers who were voted out of their corporation. And when they came back to their farm, it was gone, so they had to start all over again. And it was political, very political. Even, I believe, our Chief Justice, Earl Warren, at the time, he didn't care about the Japanese. And so there are quite a few high-ranking government officials that I do not respect. You know of Walt Woodward. He sacrificed his newspaper to help the Japanese and their possessions on the island. Yes.
Right, quite an example.
Yes. There are very, very few people of his caliber to stand behind to protect the property of the Japanese.
Before our break, we were talking about some of your experience in Tule Lake, you and your family members. And I wanted to ask you, was your younger brother also involved with the Hokoku Seinendan?
Yes.
He was younger than you were.
Yes, he's about maybe 2.5 years younger than I was.
But were you together most of the time in the group activities, the training and the school work?
Yes,
with your
but
brother, or separated out because of your age?
I was in one age group in the learning Japanese language, and he was in another group. So we were all divided according to our age in the language school.
And then I think you mentioned earlier that each ward had its own group.
It's very possible. I'm not really familiar with the different group or organization within the. I'm only familiar with the ward in which we were living in. And that group was the Hokoku Seinendan.
Well, you know, I also wanted to ask you about this time in Tule Lake. I guess it was in 1944, fairly early in 1944, that the administration announced that the Nisei were going to be drafted into the U.S. Army. Do you recall hearing about that?
Not particularly. The only time that I had to answer the loyalty question, 2728, was in Manzanar. And so most of the boys who answered yes, yes to the question were definitely would volunteer for the military.
Well, now also you had started taking some steps to renounce your citizenship. And could you tell me, when did you first discuss that with your parents, and what did you have to do to start that process?
My mother said, told me that she had requested through the Spanish embassy to be included in the transporting to Crystal City, to be qualified to be used as a civilian exchange. And knowing that we were still classified as U.S. citizenship, and that in order to qualify, the Spanish embassy had requested my mother or my parents to change the spelling of our name from Ogami to Ogami from Ogami. Just the word spelling. So we had to change our name and have it notarized. And I'm trying to recall, and I'm positive that it was changed in Turtle Lake, because the county that had to certify it was in Modoc County, and that's Turtle Lake.
Do you have any idea why they requested that this name change?
The spelling?
The spelling?
Because the Chinese character of our name is correctly pronounced Ogami. And but at the time my father was living in United States, Ogami was a little difficult for the Caucasian to pronounce. So they just changed the G to K. And our name from thereafter was pronounced all different ways. Okami, Okami, Okami. And but it didn't matter to us. The name is the name. So.
But for the purposes of your parents returning to Japan, they needed to make this change.
Yes. So correspond with the Chinese character.
And so then the family name, the spelling, the Romanized spelling was changed to
Yes.
Ogami.
And it still remains Ogami.
And what did you need to do for the citizenship renouncing?
It was, I don't remember whether we signed documents to renounce, but after the loyalty oath, the loyalty question, probably they just regard us as in favor of giving up our U.S. citizen right. Probably we did sign documents to that respect.
I did read that supposedly, if a proper procedure was done, that each person renouncing United States citizenship was supposed to have an individual hearing. Do you recall anything like that? Meeting with somebody, probably in Tule Lake, to discuss renouncing your citizenship or signing anything in front of an official person?
At the time of answering the questions, it was the individual hearing officer. And I don't recall whether that was in Manzanar or Tule Lake. But I'm pretty positive that I entered 2728 in Manzanar, and that qualified me to be transferred to Tule Lake.
Right. Well, while you were in Tule Lake, there were some incidents at the Tule Lake camp that were pretty serious. I read that in May of 1944, that James Okamoto was shot and killed by a guard. Do you have any recollection of that?
No particular recollection, but I do know that incidents did happen in Tule Lake. I wasn't involved in any organization that were extremely violent. The only organization was Hokokusei Nindan, and that was the wishes of my parents to be in there in name only, but I did participate in military type of calisthenics, marching, and we did march around there military style and military command and marching. We had to march, and there's a trot type of marching. We call that was called kakeashi, kakeashi, and to make a right turn, left turn, and turnabout. That's all in Japanese military style.
Well, you know, another thing that happened in Tule Lake was that there were some rumors spread that families would be separated, and that possibly parents might be sent one place and children to another. Did you hear any of these rumors, or did they affect you or your family in any way?
I don't recall that rumors. Probably any of us that were answered the question 2728, no, and some in the family may have no, yes. They might be presumably separated.
But you yourself and your parents, you weren't worried that you were going to be separated?
No, I was positive that we'll be intact and be and go to Japan if that was possible.
So then when did you find out that that in fact you and your brother were going to be separated from the family and sent to Bismarck camp?
We were notified, and as soon as we were notified, then we had to prepare to leave the camp.
So you got a very short notice before leaving Tule Lake?
Yes. No, that's true. The notice was given to us, and then we just have to take our personal belongings and be transported out of the camp.
Were you surprised that you were going to be taken from Tule Lake?
Not particularly, because that was a one-step positive that we would be, that we would go to Japan. So the separation's there.
So it was explained to you that this was part of your process to going to Japan.
I don't know if I could say that it was that we knew that would be part of the process going to Japan, but it meant closer of qualifying to be deported, so to speak.
And was there any explanation given as to why you and your brother were taken to Bismarck and your parents and younger sister were left in Tule Lake?
There's no explanation, but actually the government was trying to separate the immediate disloyal persons and divide, separate them from the ones that are loyal. And, but I didn't feel that all of us that went to Bismarck would be going to Japan.
What gave you that feeling?
That all of them were, I felt this, that all of the ones that went to Bismarck, the parents weren't really planning to go all the way to go to Japan.
What gave you that idea?
I don't know. I really don't recall what made me feel that way. But I just followed the orders to prepare to leave to the lake, and then I finally, brother and I and the rest of the group were transferred to the Bismarck.
When was that?
This was in early '45.
Well, tell me, now the camp at Fort Lincoln was different from the Manzanar or the other WRA, War Relocation Administration camps, because Fort Lincoln was part of the system of camps that were for alien enemies.
Yes.
So that they first held Issei, the Japanese immigrants, and some Germans, and
Yes.
some of them had Italians also, and other citizens of other countries. But when you arrived with this large group of other young men, it sounds like most of you had been U.S. citizens, but then had renounced citizenship or were in the process of renouncing. So, so it was a different kind of a camp, and as I understand it, a different system.
Yes.
When you got there, what kinds of differences did you notice, if any, between Fort Lincoln and the other camps?
I didn't see any difference as far as the camp was concerned. Now, Manzanar and Tule Lake, they're under WRA, War Relocation authorities. Fort Lincoln, Bismarck, North Dakota, was under jurisdiction of the Justice Department, and that's the difference. And when we arrived, there were already Romanians prisoners, and they were actually prisoners. Most of them were in the Air Force of the Romanian country. And by conversation with the Romanians there, that they were captured and transferred to South America. And then from South America, they were transferred up and ended in Bismarck, North Dakota. And they were good to us. We got along well, although they were separated in a separate section of the camp. And there were musicians among them and doctors, and they're very talented in music. So we had the privilege of listening to their music playing. Violin, especially, they were string instruments.
It sounds quite interesting to be in a camp now that wasn't all Japanese
Yes.
Americans.
And they also conducted, and they want to make sure that we didn't have astic feet to go swimming. And so among them was a doctor that would check your feet before you went in. And I had slight case of astic feet. So before I went in, I showered and scrubbed my feet. And I would put the lotion or jelly type of cream on my feet, so it wouldn't show vaguely that it wouldn't show exactly what my feet was, astic feet or not. And so I passed, and I was able to swim. I wasn't a very good swimmer because I never learned to swim well, but I enjoyed getting in the water. It's a heated pool.
So it sounds like, in some ways, the conditions at Fort Lincoln were a little bit better. That you had the pool and you had a different kind of a living quarters arrangement. What else do you recall about the conditions there at Fort Lincoln?
They had steel cots, and they have a lower and upper cots. And I slept on the bottom, and my brother slept on top. And so all the others in that room, someone had to choose to sleep on top.
And during the time that you and your brother were there, were you able to correspond with your parents at all?
Yes.
And what did you hear from them, or how?
Well, we were able to write letters and mail them out, but they were all censored going out, and incoming mail was also censored. And some of the mail letters that were received, they couldn't distinguish what the message was all about, but they cut it out. They didn't block it out, but simply cut out. And there wasn't a translator, and we would see him walking towards his office, and he was the one that would read the letter and remove what they thought that was important to remove.
So, were you worried at all about what might be happening to your parents and sister while you were separated?
No, we weren't worried, because we knew that the outcome would be to go to Japan.
Well, now you had mentioned earlier that during the time you were in Bismarck that you were questioned. Could you tell about that? What kind of questioning was this and what it was about?
Yes, we heard words that the word that we're going to have I think the word was hoso, which could be regarded as broadcast. and or vaccination. I don't know which it was, but that was what was mentioned, that we're going to go and see about Hoso. And but it actually was, we were going to be questioned. And this question interview was prior to leave the United States. And so actually they were going to determine who would go and who would stay. And later on, I understood that the government was trying to reduce the number of people that will go to Japan. And I think that was the purpose. And they would question you, talking about what you did before at the Pearl Harbor, and then now you decide to go to Japan, and the reason why you want to go to Japan. And they asked me, and I imagine they asked each individual about joining the Imperial Army. And my answer was, I would not volunteer to join the military. But if I had to be inducted, same as I would have had to in the United States, that I would have to agree to be inducted. The other question was asked, that if I confronted a U.S. soldier, that I would shoot to kill him. I said, no, I could not do that. Actually, I owe my life to the United States because I was educated and grew up there. And I have never been in Japan. So I said I would if I was assigned to a prisoner of war camp and there's an American soldier in the camp, that I would not see them harmed. And that's all I could say, that what my intent will be if I met with a U.S. soldier.
So, with this kind of questioning, did you discuss with your brother or any of the other fellows there what was going on, why you were being questioned in this way, or what you think the result would be of this questioning?
Through hearsay, is that I believe it was mentioned that there were governments trying to prevent as many of us not to go to Japan, to refuse to go. And later on, after I master came back, returned to the United States, that there was a purpose of our interview to refuse to go to Japan. But I have already made up my mind, because my parents made up my mind for me. And they said, regardless, whatever happens, you wish to go to Japan. And that's where I ended up going to Japan.
Well, before we get there, I wanted to ask just a little bit more about any memories you had of Bismarck Camp, or Fort Lincoln Camp actually is the formal name. And for example, what might be a typical day in Bismarck? What might it be like from the time that you were woken up?
I didn't know what to expect, but there were activities. the Romanians had made a skating rink ready, and they had skates available. So we were able to borrow the skates and skate around this rink that they had made already. So the Romanians are good skaters, and we never had skates before, and so we had fun. And during the warmer days, we organized a softball team, and so we played softball. And I wasn't a very good baseball player, so they put me in left field. Let's see. I believe it's right field. Yes, right field. It's right from the batter. And so I had a problem judging the ball to catch, but I did all right. And occasionally I had fortunate hit with the baseball, and I did get on bases, and it was fun. It was a good pastime. And there's one pitcher, young pitcher, and he was good in a windmill pitch. You know what a windmill pitch is. And his balls would come by real fast, and he needed someone to catch for him. And I had the courage enough to sit behind with a catcher's glove to catch it. And I was kind of worried about not catching his balls, but I managed to catch him. And he and I was a pretty good team for his practice. And he would show me how he could pitch a riser and a pitch inside curve and outside curve, and he placed his knuckle on the ball so that it would spin certain ways. See, the spin of the ball will determine which way the ball is going to go. And so that was fun, good pastime.
What, did you have very many other organized activities? Like, for example, you mentioned in Tule Lake there were the Japanese language classes, and there were the exercises and so forth. Did you have similar kinds of activities at Fort Lincoln?
At Fort Lincoln, we had to study Japanese language and individually, but there was some help. They had books. So I spent most of the day studying the Japanese language. And I went from one book to the next book, lesson book. And I would copy what I read. And I would practice writing the kanji. And within a few months, which is approximately 1 year, from February to December. Then the month of December, we got our notice to board a train. And the train destination was Portland, Oregon.
I'm going to ask you before going to Portland, this was then the end of 1945.
Yes.
And in the meantime, while you and your brother had been at Bismarck, the war had ended. World War II had ended.
Yes.
The U.S. Bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes.
With the atom bomb. And how much of this news did you get while you were at Bismarck? Did you hear about the atom bombing?
Atom bombing, I don't remember. But when President Roosevelt died, it was announced. And everyone in the room hurrayed. They praised that he died, because he's the one that signed the executive order. And that was not real. And I can remember the guard coming in, and he wanted to quiet us down, because when you have 600 boys yelling "hooray" or whatever, and But I think they said because they were the enemy country of Japan. That's the reason why they said that. But I don't think we really meant it.
You yourself didn't really feel that happy on the death of the president.
But the bombing, I'm not quite sure if it was announced over the public address system.
And then what happened when the end of the war was announced, the surrender of Japan?
That I really don't recall. It was sort of a, to me, very quiet announcement, if there was an announcement. But see, that was August 14th, and then there was a preparation of to prepare to be transferred to Portland, Oregon.
You know, I'm wondering about when Japan surrendered. It must have been quite a shock for some of the men who were planning to go to Japan.
Yes.
Some of them who were very much pro-Japan.
Yes.
Did you ever hear anything from them, or was there some talk that you heard of their reactions after they finally realized that Japan had actually lost the war?
My father was transferred from Bismarck, and I mean, transferred from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Bismarck, because we were already there. And so my father, my brother, and myself were in the same room. They placed us there. And he knew about it more than I did, that Japan lost the war. And so he was telling me that Japan actually did not lose the war. That's their feeling. That was his feeling. And I was preparing myself to go to Japan. And I said that Japan has nothing left, that they're short of food, they're short of supplies. And he says that since he felt that Japan was a stronger nation, that they will be sending ships to the United States to carry the Japanese people back to Japan. This is what he actually told me. And I said that he was not correct.
But your father was really convinced.
Oh yes, he was convinced that his country, Japan, was a stronger nation. And there were people in Brazil that I have heard and read about that were climbing up on top of hills to watch for ships from Japan to come and take them back to Japan. Have you heard that?
No, but I can imagine that.
Yes, that they actually were convinced that Japan was a stronger nation, just like my father thought.
So did your father, at that point, he still did not believe that Japan had surrendered?
I really don't think so, but he still believed, until he arrived in Japan, that Japan was totally devastated.
And how did you, it sounds like you were already convinced that Japan was really low on supplies and food and everything. How did you get that impression, or how did you learn about the that condition of Japan?
Well, I just thought in my own mind that Japan had lost, and that their supply of food was very, very low. And I told my father I was prepared to live on skimono and rice, that I was prepared for that. And but knowing that he has tambo in Japan, and Luke had patch for vegetables, that at least we can survive with food.
So you were mentioning that your father had been transferred from Tule Lake to the camp at Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe, yes.
And about when was it that he joined you and your brother in Bismarck? Was that?
It was just prior to being transferred to Portland.
So tell me about that. How were hundreds of you shipped out of Bismarck to Portland, Oregon, or how did that happen?
The one that were positive to go to Japan, they were among them, and mainly to meet their family. So when we were transferred from Bismarck to Portland, and then we were, I remember getting off the train onto bus and going to the pier where USS General Gordon was berthed. And then we walked to the ship, and we were assigned where to go. And so we went on the gangway onto the deck, and then we were direction to where to go. So we went down and stepped down. We were at the very bottom, and they had the bunks were canvas bunks, and I was on the very bottom. So there were 6 high. In other words, there's 6 persons sleeping on top of each other, and it was very difficult to get in and out. There was very little space, and in order to the bottom person to get out, the top person has to get out first. So it's kind of uncomfortable. But those were troop transport, and so even the soldiers being transferred from the United States to war zone and back were in the same condition. And it was a huge ship. It was a troop transport general class. 10,000 troops was the capacity.
And were your mother and sister on the same ship?
Yes.
Were you aware of that they weren't going on the same ship?
Oh yes. We would have to join them. But one section of the ship were for females, one section for the male.
So your mother and sister had been brought directly from Tule Lake to Portland?
Yes.
And tell me about the actual trip from Portland to Japan.
From Portland, the ship came down the Columbia River, and that was during the daytime. And then when it reached Astoria, they anchored overnight. And then the next morning, they set for sail through. And the mouth of the Columbia River, there's sandbars, and so they had to have the pilot to guide the ship out to open sea. And I don't know what it was, but there's one time as they headed to open sea, the ship the bow just took a deep down, and I didn't know what it was. But I met a doctor, and he asked me to assist him in sick bay. And he says, Art, you can stay up here. It's more comfortable. So I spent most of the time in a sick bay area. It was nice, clean, roomy, and bright. And occasionally I would go out on the deck and sit in a bench outside deck. And MP would come along and says, Sir, you better go inside. They didn't want us out. But I'd sneak out, get out there again. And at high seas, it was pretty rough. The bow of the ship would go into the water, and it comes out. As you notice in the pictures, where the ship would go in real deep and come up. And that was, and then the doctor would make inspection of the ship, and he would go from one section of the ship to the other. I would follow him. And then we looked down at the bow, and at the bottom of the bow there was room for 17 boys. And the bow would come up at least 56 feet up and go down 60 feet down. So that's 100 feet of up and down. And I looked down there, I've never seen seasick persons. But they survived it.
My goodness.
I think it took probably 15 days, 16 days. They were going the Great Northern Route, going up close to Alaska. And they hit the storm. They headed into a storm, so they went south. And I believe we sailed approximately 400 miles north of the Hawaiian Islands. We couldn't see them. But I was sick for 3 days. But the meals on board the ship was good. I liked the Navy bean. This is real good. And,
well, you know, while the ship was underway and you were actually on the seas on your way to Japan, what was going through your mind? Were you relieved that, you know, finally you were actually going to Japan, or worried, or both?
well, I was wondering what it's going to be like. And I was busy assisting the doctor, and I was busy going to the mess hall, what they call the galley, to eat. So there was a lot of activity on board the ship, and they would have man overboard drill, and I'm sure they had a drill. What do you call it? I don't know what they termed that. We had to do that on our cruise ship that we went on to Alaska and the Panama Canal cruise. Lifeboat drill, that's it. Lifeboat drill. And so we had to put on life jackets and go through the drill. And when the ship is dead stop in sea, it would roll. And these swells are so huge that you would almost think that you would slide off the ship. And, but those are some of the activities that we had to do.
So, I was going to ask you, had you or your parents had any communication with any relatives in Japan? Did anybody know that you were going to be arriving?
I really don't know. And because we were approximately four years in the camp, and there was no communication by mail during the war, because there's no mail service between the United States and Japan.
Well, I understand that some people were able to communicate through the Red Cross, but that it was very difficult.
That's very possible, that, but time-consuming too.
So what happened when the ship arrived in Japan?
The ship arrived in Japan. Everyone disembarked, and
Oh, excuse me, what port was that that you came into?
I believe it's Kurihama. See, there's different centers, military centers, and I remember Kurihama, and there were military barracks there. And so we were housed in rooms in the compound. And since I was able-bodied, I had to stay back to unload the cargo ship with all of our belongings. And so I'd go out with a landing craft, and then with the crew, we would unload the ship and load the landing craft, and then bring them to the compound and put them in a warehouse. And I was requested to stay until they were loaded into freight cars to the destination where they were going. And I was in charge with all the belongings going to Fukuoka. And so I had to stay and make sure all the baggage and the belongings of all the people were loaded in the boxcar. And as you know, all the freight cars, they just have a piece of wire to hold the ship. And that I knew that anyone, as the train is stopped at a siding, that someone could come and cut the wire. So I had 2 padlocks of my own. So I locked them with the padlock and kept the key. And fortunately, my father's relative worked at the freight yard in Fukuoka, and he notified us when that particular car arrived. So I went down and unlocked it and notified all the recipients of their belongings to go to the Fukuoka station and claim their belongings.
So while you were doing this this labor, what was happening to your parents, your sister and brother?
My mother and sister and a younger brother went on to my father's place. And my mother knew how to find a way to there. And my older sister and her husband and the baby went on to Kumamoto. And actually, after all the goods were loaded on the train, then they gave us a third-class ticket to get on board the train to go to Fukuoka. And so we walked to the train station and waited for the train to come by. But we didn't know what train it was. It was a chaos. And so finally the train came and we boarded it. no one else boarded it, just very few people. Then it went to the next station, a few more people got in. And then as it went down, it was packed later on. And when the train stopped, it stopped at the port of Fukuoka. And Fukuoka didn't have a port, so they called it Hakata. See, Hakata is the business section of Fukuoka. And so all the train station and port is called Hakata. And so we got off the train at the very end. We heard later that it was a train to transport the Korean evacuees. See, they were transporting all the Koreans back to Korea, and that's the train that we were on. And everyone was surprised that it ended in the port of Hakata. So from there, my father and I walked to a trolley stop, and then he was asking different people how to get over to Ropponmatsu. That's where he knew how to walk from. Ropponmatsu was a trolley stop section, and we arrived there, and then we went along this. There was a river, and the river is named Hikawa, and he knew how to go along the riverbank. There's a road, and go to Nagao, which was a little village, and from there we go east to his birthplace, Hibaru, and we walked and we walked, and he hadn't been to Japan for 40 years, and so he had inquired at different people how to get to Hibaru. And we made it. I was carrying my suitcase. I was tired. And we finally arrived at his home. And my mother and my sister was already there. And it was no bus. See, a lot of the tram stations were destroyed. And, I can tell you something about the tram station. They had shortage of fuel, so they're running cars on charcoal, and this is quite an experience. And I can explain a little bit later on how they run on charcoal.
So before our break, you were just telling about arriving in Japan, and when was it that you arrived in Japan?
It was about January 15th, 1946.
And you were saying earlier that your father really didn't believe that Japan was devastated by the war until he got back to Japan. What, as you were making the journey through the area to back to his home, did he start realizing what the situation really was?
Yes, he did, because as we were traveling south, is that he liked to read books. So he went out to see if he can find some books to buy. And but he came back with no books. I asked him, try to find something to eat. And there weren't any vendors because they didn't have anything to sell. And beside, they were probably been told that this train is carrying evacuees of Koreans, and that's why no one came in. but all during the traveling south. They didn't. There was no conductor to check the tickets, and so no one even cared who was aboard the train. And there was one man that boarded the train was sitting across from me, and he had lunch. He opened up nice white nigiri sushi, and then they were eating peanuts too. And here we were given hardtack, and Japanese hardtack is small little biscuits, and they were hard, and they didn't taste too bad, really. But the military hardtack was much better, much more nourishing. And so this man was eating this white sushi, you know. And, but he did share something to me, as I remember. I don't remember what. And, but after long hours, we finally arrived in Fukuoka. But before going to the train station, I have been told by other boys that whoever stops and say that they will carry your baggage for them, don't let them, because they'll put them on these three-wheeled vehicles, and they put on they're called sanrinsha, which means three-wheeled vehicle. You put it on there, and they'll take off with your belongings. We were warned about that. And then also one man stopped, and he says, he motioned, put it on top there. And I looked at it, and what he was carrying was what is known as night soil. You know what night soil is? And it's all messy on top of the cover. And I didn't want to put my belongings on that. But for him, it'd been fine because he'll run off with our belongings. And that's what I experienced that. And my first impression when I arrived and walking, I felt that I have entered an area 20 years behind the present age. And so I went backwards.
So, in other words, the Japan that you saw in 1946 reminded you of the 1920s in the United States.
Yes. It's, because they didn't have anything, and no modern transportation. So the cars were very, very few, and the trucks were quite old. So.
And you were saying earlier that some of the vehicles were run using charcoal.
That's after I arrived in Fukuoka and going to work. And the reason why they could run on charcoal is that they have a big tank, like a heater, and they would put burning charcoal at the base of it, and they have a little opening to put it in. Then they have a crank to blow to make the charcoal hotter, and the fumes would go over a tube and go down to the carburetor. And so the fumes, I believe they were mixed with water. And so with the vapor of the water and the fumes of the charcoal would act as the gasoline power, fuel, to go through the carburetor of the car and it was very, very crude. And as they would get up speed, sometimes it'll pop and like backfire and make noises, and just barely move the vehicle. And some of the, like a Chevrolet sedan, are also converted to burning charcoal. And then they have this big tube over the roof of the car. And every now and then they would have to stop and crank up the blower and make the charcoal hotter. It's quite a sight.
It's incredible. So in the first month or so that you were there, this is still winter because it's January,
Yes.
February.
It was cold, and but we survived it. Fortunately, I was able to work at the military hospital.
Well, before that, you had applied for a different job.
Yes,
Didn't you?
the first job I applied for was at the 5th Air Force Base, and I worked there for a couple of days, and I was called in and was told that they couldn't use me anymore. And I didn't know why, because all my records follow me. And then I applied for interpreter work at the military hospital in Fukuoka. And there they didn't care, and so the labor office sent me to utilities office. And the sergeant in the utilities office looked up, saw me, and I told him that my name is Arthur Ogami, and I was sent here to work, to report. And he looked at me and jumped up, and there was already an interpreter in the office. So he says, "Dr. Green, could you stand up, please?" So he stood up, moved his desk way in a corner, and then he moved another desk in another position. He says, "Art, you sit here." Dr. Green says, "Where shall I sit?" And they put him way in a corner, out of the way. Poor thing. And he was very elderly, and he had knowledge to speak English, but it's a Japanese English. And so they had a little difficulty understanding, and he had difficulty translation, interpret. And so eventually he was sent back to the labor office to be sent to another place. And Sergeant Tague, I remember his name, and he was from Colorado. Then I was then introduced to Lieutenant Kitchen, and he was from Colorado also, Loveland. That's where he lived. I was born and raised there. And he wanted to go to school of veterinary medicine, and that was his wishes. But Lieutenant Kitchen and I and the sergeant worked real well together, and so any orders that were needed to be given to the utility sections, I interpreted for them, translated for them, and he had charge of plumbing department, electric, carpentry, painting, and whatever had to do with construction and repairs. So I had a good time. I learned quite a bit about how to maintain and repair different minor repairs of the hospital. And he also had responsibility of contractors come do contract work, and I had to do interpreting to them. And
so, excuse me, just I want to make sure I understand this right. This was a U.S. military hospital.
yes,
And the utilities section employed Japanese civilians
Yes.
to do some of this work, and also some of the contracting, also to Japanese
Japanese
laborers
contractor.
or right, contractors.
That's correct.
And so you were the one who was translating and bridging the communication back and forth between the sergeant and all these workers.
Yes, I was a liaison, and so that the contractor or the employees knew what they were supposed to do, and so each department had a enlisted man in charge. Generally, there were sergeants, and it was a good job, and my responsibility was very high, and so I treated them. I was equally with the employee and with the military.
So that's interesting. You were really in the middle.
Yes.
Then between the American military and the Japanese civilians.
Yes.
And you yourself were not a U.S. citizen anymore, but it sounds like that didn't make any difference to your boss or to the other personnel.
No. He liked me so much that being a renouncee didn't matter to him. Being labeled disloyal didn't matter to them. And also the commanding officer knew this, because they were informed what my character was. And I remember the first officer that I worked, commanding officer, was Colonel Woolgard. And he was sort of an old grouch. No one liked him. But from GHQ, from Tokyo, colonels would come and make an inspection. And so one time in the boiler room, Colonel Woolgard was there, and the inspector from GHQ was asking Colonel Woolgard. It was kind of messy in the boiler room, and I just stood back. So I was listening to the inspector, and I was taking notes down. And Colonel Woolgard was listening to the inspectors. So, and after they finished, then I stepped in. I said, "Okay, I will take care of this." So Colonel Woolgard stand back, and so I took all the information from the inspector. And then when they left, I went back to the utilities office and assigned necessary personnel to take care of the problem. And from then on, whenever the inspectors come down, I went with them. So I took a lot of responsibility away from the commanding officer. And he was happy, and the utilities officer was happy because he didn't have to spend all his time.
Well, so then, as time passed, I understand your sister also was able to get a job, and was your brother also working?
No, my brother went some other way, and I don't know where he went to work. And my younger sister was working at multi-government as in a typing pool, and my wife Kimmy was also working there. And in time, this wasn't immediately when I arrived in Japan. It was several years. And then my sister asked me if I would be interested in meeting a Japanese girl. And so I made a date to for my sister to bring Kimmy to a trolley stop that's near the front of the hospital. And that's where she introduced me to my wife, Kimmy. and things led to one from another. Now she's here.
So when did you get married?
It was, she introduced me to Kimmy. It was sometime in 1949, and we were married in 1950.
Well, so then at some point, did you start thinking about returning to the United States or regaining your citizenship?
Not at that time, because there was talks that Vern and Colin, the attorney, was preparing a class action suit against the government to restore American citizens. And he was asking for $400, more like a deposit or retainer. And he said that if you paid the $400, that they would arrange that for you to go to the United States to stand trial or have a hearing. But that didn't come about. I did not pay it because I knew my chances of being reinstated would be very, very slim. So I didn't pursue that. And but I was very loyal to working for the working at the military hospital. That the commanding officer kind of put me under his hand, and he and I was very, very friendly. We were very close. And even after work, I would go on the way to Kimmy's parents' home. It was nearby his residence, and I would stop there and visit with him. And he liked to drink, so I would be sitting there, and his wife would be sitting, and we always talked together. And then his name was Colonel Duryea, and he said, "Ark, you want a highball?" I said, "Okay." So he asked this, "Minasan, bring Art a highball." And that was the housekeeper for them. And so she'd go out and bring in a highball. Big glass. And so I drank it. And after I drank it down and finished visiting, then I walk over a few blocks to see Kimmy. And then Kimmy's mother would say, Ogami-san nonda ne. My face would be flushing red. And, but I wasn't a drinker. But I managed to find my way over there. And later, I found that Minasan was a sister to a babysitter that we arranged to have her come from Japan to babysit our baby after it was born. And the sister is here today in the United States, married to Minasan, that was the housekeeper, was the former husband of Yasuko-san, her babysitter. She passed away, so she married her brother-in-law. And they lived in Walnut, where we live now. It's a coincidence that Yasuko-san was our babysitter, and now the wife of this retired minister. So there were fairly close friends now.
Well, so what did cause you to start thinking about your U.S. citizenship and seriously thinking about returning to the United States?
As command officer, liked me and trusted me so much, and I worked very loyally for the hospital. So he arranged with the American consulate in Fukuoka to interview me and fill out application for reinstatement. And so I went to meet the American consulate, and his name was John Ainsworth, a very nice gentleman. And so I filled out the application for reinstatement, and he looked it over, and he said, "Art, you don't have to tell everything about your experience." I said, "Thank you." And so they forwarded that to the State Department in Washington, D.C. And just about within a month, the reply came, and I was reinstated. And the U.S. consulate notified Colonel Duryea. And as soon as he received it, he called me in my office, and he says, "Art, I want to see you immediately." So I hobbled over to his office, and headquarters office knew that I was very close to the commanding officer. So as soon as I appear, the door is wide open for me to go into Colonel Duryea's office. And as soon as I entered, he stood up and said, "Art, I wanted to be the first to congratulate you." So he congratulated me. And he was hoping that I could return to the United States and go to OCS school. That's Officers Candidate School. And but after he realized that there'll be no possibility that even if I did become a non-commissioned officer, that I would not be able to be assigned to his unit. And so he says, probably best thing for you to do is return to the United States, start all over again, and work. And that's what I did.
Wow. So how did you feel when you got this?
I felt good. I says, now I could return to the United States, start over again. To make sure that I would not have any difficulty to live the first few months, he sent me a check, his personal check for $100 to start with. And when I arrived in the United States, I had less than $3 in my pocket, and the $100 check of Colonel Duryea. At that time, he was a commanding officer of hospital in Fort Riley, Kansas. And I did communicate with him there, write letters, and he'd write back. And my sister had married a soldier and was living in Los Angeles at the time. So she met me at the pier in Wilmington, California. And I stayed with her for, I think, just about a month. And then I found a place to stay in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles.
Before we go any further about your return to the U.S., I wanted to just ask a little bit more about your time in Japan. And it sounds like you had a very responsible and satisfying job there at the hospital.
Yes.
You also had gotten married and started a family.
Yes.
Because was your first child born while you were still in Japan, or
Yes. Our son was born March 14th, 1952. And that was the year I received my reinstatement.
And in the meantime, your parents were still living on your father's family property.
Yes.
And you said also that your sister had gotten married and eventually moved back to the United States.
Yes.
So did you have any mixed feelings about leaving Japan?
No. I knew that with my knowledge of reading and writing Japanese language would hinder me from any good position with any company. And so I didn't regret leaving Japan.
Was there anything else about your time in Japan that you wanted to mention that?
Well,
you had mentioned. Excuse me. You mentioned earlier a little bit about there were some things that you hadn't known anything about that you were confronted with, such as the black market system.
Yes, we had a contractor that was building a boiler system on the property, and they were a big contractor, and I needed some money for some occasion. I don't quite remember, but I asked for 10,000 yen if they would loan it to me, and they were glad, and presently loaned me 10,000 yen. Okay. So I spent that money, and then New Year's comes around. At New Year's, I understood that anyone who owed money would pay it back or make arrangements to pay back, even on installment, that was customary. So from my pay, I accumulated 10,000 yen, put it in an envelope, and when I met with the supervisor of the project, I handed it over to them. I said, I borrowed this money from you, and it's customary to return any money owed to the person that they borrowed it from. So I gave it to them. And they were shocked. They said they never experienced that before, that they refused to take it back. And I thanked them for it. They told me that there were other interpreters that were Japanese, that they would demand bribe. I didn't know this. And they told me that they knew I was going to return to the United States. They said, when you, on your way, do stop at our headquarters office in Osaka, and which I did. And but they said that any of these other persons ever come to their office, they would tell them to move. They would not receive them. I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was that other interpreters took advantage of their ability to speak English to take bribe. Even black market. I didn't know what black market was. And I had all opportunity to sell items on black market. And that's why I wasn't a very popular person in Japan, in that area. So
because you did not participate in
no,
that.
no. But I was fair with the Japanese government and the military. I didn't favor either one. I was equal. So on our way to return to the United States, I stopped at the main office of this contractor, and they showed me they gave me a tour of their factory. See, they built locomotives, bridges, boilers. And so they were real happy for me. Then I asked them where there would be a hotel where we could stay. They said, oh yes, we have a place where you can stay. We'll find one. And so my wife and I went out and they put us in a car. It was a company car. And the personnel of the company that knew me were walking beside the car going to this hotel. Then it stopped, we got out. Then my wife looked at the sign on the side of the hotel. And it's for, I think it said, Kisegaisha Shio, which means that it's for the use of the company that built the boiler. And so we went in, and the receptionist accepted us, showed us our room. And they even brought food for us. And then when we checked out, there was no charge. So it pays, to be fair.
Well, so then you and your wife then departed from Japan, and was this, you said in 1953, about, was it in
March.
early of March
Yes.
of 1953?
1st of March, I left, boarded ship left Japan. And it's about the middle of March that I arrived.
And your sister greeted you,
Yes, she came after me.
and you had to start all over. So
Yes.
so how did you do that? What did you do?
Sunday, I disembarked on the ship. Monday, I used my sister's car. I went for DMV, for driving test. And I passed. And then that same morning, I went to Department of Employment, State Department of Employment on South Flower. 525 South Flower. And they sent me to what's called in for an interview. And the supervisor for billing at the company looked over my employment application. And then he asked me when I wish to start work. I said, I need the money, I'll start today. He says, come in at 7:45 tomorrow morning. That was Tuesday. And I worked there for 9 months. And then I met my friend that was in the internment camp in Manzanar, and he had a radio, TV, and appliance store. So I went to work for him. So I started billing at $300 a month. Then my friend offered to pay me $325 a month, and I worked. And then when my wife came in November of 1953, she came. Then I was renting a room in a hotel on San Pedro Street. And then when she came, my friend that I worked for in the fruit stand in Whittier had apartments in East LA. And so I rented an apartment there when my wife came. We stayed there for a while. Then she said she liked to work. And so I took her for an interview with the same company I worked as a builder typist. And they said, yes, we'll try her out. And they put on trial. And she worked there for over 30 years. So the timing was right for us. And so we saved and invested in real estate. Then we bought an apartment to rent. And so we have a comfortable income now.
And in addition to your son, you also have 2 daughters.
Yes, we wanted to have a girl, and the girl wasn't coming. So we decided, we heard about adopting babies from Japan. So we became in contact with Dr. DeFigurado, and he was an attorney, and he was determined to have people adopt at least, I think that was 200 babies that he wanted to be involved in with adoption. And so we corresponded with him, and he lived in Yokohama. He had a Portuguese name, but he was Japanese. And so he found a girl, baby girl in Fukuoka. And the girl was, I think, 6 months or 8 months old. And they sent us the picture, and we accepted. And so as soon as we accepted, we sent the money. And then as a deposit, I believe. And then the girl was transferred from Fukuoka to Elizabeth Sanders' home in Yokohama. That's where all the babies or children that's going to be adopted would be. And then about, it took 10 months. By the time that all the papers were all prepared, the name of the girl, we'd named her Charlene. And it was, well, Charlene was 18 months by the time we received her. So we went down to the airport, picked her up, brought her home. We lived in La Puente at the time. And in order to qualify for the adoption, I guess the immigration office would come and inspect your home. They also questioned the neighbors, and we qualified. So now we have Charlene, now living in Ohio with 2 children. And we're very happy with her.
And then you have your youngest daughter.
That youngest daughter came soon as we adopted Charlene, and then Kimmy became pregnant. Then we had Patty, and she was born December 5, 1963. And she's now 41. And she's a registered nurse at Los Angeles County Hospital. And she's been working there for going on 15 years. So we're happy with it.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, as your children were growing up, and let's see, and your son's name is Eugene?
Eugene, yes.
Do you know if any of them ever faced any kind of prejudice or had any difficulty because they were Japanese American when they were kids growing up?
I don't think so. Our son Gene went to elementary school from kindergarten on in La Puente, and he made friends with the kids there. And one of the parents of one of the boys that he made friends with was Larry Keimer, and his parents are our close friend even today. And so that's, I guess, good 50 years in our 50th anniversary, we invited them to our 50th anniversary dinner. And that was April 2001 when we had our anniversary dinner. And we had the Keimers there and his son. And then we made friends with a retired airline pilot that lived on Bainbridge Island. And we made friends with him during the time that we owned a house on Sunrise Drive on Bainbridge Island. And we invited him to come to our anniversary dinner. We had a number of friends that we made.
That's wonderful. Well, so as time has passed on, I was wondering, did your kids ever ask you about World War II and your experiences, or did you ever talk to them about anything that happened during those years?
Our grandchildren in Ohio, they were studying about the evacuation and internment. So they asked me to give them information about the my experience in the internment, and so they used the information I gave them, and they had sort of like a panel discussion, and they got good grades towards that, and they were happy about it.
Well, was that the first time you had talked about your World War II experiences?
No, one time in Walnut, in elementary school, our daughter Patty mentioned that her father was interned and had the World War II evacuation experience. And so her teacher asked me to appear in the classroom so I could tell my experience to the students. And then they would ask me questions. So I'd answer them, tell them my experience as they answered the questions.
What was that like for you, going into a classroom like that and having kids ask you questions?
I think that was good. They were interested in knowing the condition, the treatment. And so what ability I had and information, I was glad to talk about it. And then another time, there was a teacher. We were living in West Covina at the time. And she was telling me that one of her students' parents were interned. But they wouldn't talk about it to the boy. And so she was asking me if I wouldn't mind talking about my experience to the boys so that he would understand. And I said, I'll be willing to.
Well, and during these times when you talk to students and younger people and even your own grandchildren, I'm wondering how they reacted when you told them the part about renouncing your citizenship.
I don't know what their reaction was, but I did explain to them why I renounced my citizenship, and that my parents were the ones that requested me to. My mother eventually came back to the United States. My father could have, but he had property, so he didn't want to lose his property. So the laws of owning property changed after the war. And if you could not manage to grow rice on your property, then you would have to give it up. And So that's probably one reason why he stayed, to keep his property.
Do you have any idea why your mother decided to come back to the United States?
Well, actually, she didn't realize the future in Japan. And so there was practically no future for her, even though my father had the property. And so she wanted to come back. And one thing, she did have a baby that's buried in the Anaheim cemetery. And so that was one good reason why she wanted to come back. But if she wanted to come back and be with her first baby, why did she want to leave the baby in the first place? She wasn't thinking about that. But as years goes on, it changes. And but she's now deceased now, and she's as close to her first baby as possible.
Well, I just had a couple more questions. As time had passed, of course, the redress movement got underway, and eventually the redress legislation was signed. And I was wondering, when you finally got your apology in the mail, or did you receive an apology in the mail?
Yes.
Well, and your check, what did you feel? What was going through your mind when you received that?
Well, I received an apology. It was signed by George Bush Sr. He's the one that signed the apology. Well, that's another piece of paper. And even to this day, in the move, we moved several times. So I really don't know where that document is today. It might come out. And I received my $20,000, and I said, well, that's fine. I'll just deposit that in savings or invest it. My brother received it, and he wasted it. So my mother received it, and she had a little bit of savings, and she added the $20,000 to it. Then when she died, my sister that took care of her most of the time while she was in a nursing home. So she said that she's going to divide that among the three of us. Four. I said, since you took care of my mother and I didn't, that I wish you that you give I wouldn't receive my share. And but my brother wanted, because he didn't have much money, he didn't save it. And so I don't know what happened to my mother's $20,000.
Well, for yourself, did it seem like the United States really had apologized to you, or did it make much of a difference to you?
Well, actually, it didn't make that much difference. The apology is just a piece of paper. And it wasn't President Bush that had to apologize. It's the one that already has deceased, especially General DeWitt and a few others behind him. I can't tell which one are strictly behind the evacuation. But as long as the people are good to us, that's what I'd like to know.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
Really, nothing's coming to my mind at this moment.
Well,
But I do feel that the United States is one of the rare countries that have used our privileges, but still we can come back and live normally. That's all I ask, that I can live in a normal condition.
Well, we really appreciate your speaking with us, and thank you very much for your time.